Estamos en un nuevo capítulo de la Entrevista Educativa, este espacio que hemos creado en Educarchile para poder conocer las ideas que hoy día están circulando en la educación en el mundo, para poder conversar con grandes entrevistados que vienen a Chile y que habitualmente no hay ocasión de conocer su voz, de conocer sus ideas. En esta ocasión tenemos la posibilidad de conversar con un invitado muy interesante. Se trata de un belga que ha vivido, sin embargo, en Inglaterra la mayoría de su carrera académica. Es el profesor Daniel Muijs. Él publicó un libro, Effective Teaching, que ya tiene 3 ediciones y más de 10.000 ejemplares vendidos, siendo un libro académico, lo que es bastante importante. Y últimamente ha estado trabajando los temas de cooperación. Es profesor de la Universidad de Southampton. How are you, Daniel?
I am very well, and I'm delighted to be here in Chile. It's a real pleasure. That is a very interesting country to visit.
Thank you. Well, maybe it's interesting for us to talk about your last work, which is about cooperation among schools. That is a topic which is not easy to understand for us, because in Chile, the system is based on the competition, and you propose the cooperation. What is the advantage of the cooperation?
Right. The basis of cooperation among schools is really as a key form of school improvement. And there are several reasons why it is a good idea for schools to work together to improve rather than just to engage in individual programs. You can draw on the complementary strengths that you have in the different schools that cooperate. I may be particularly strong in mathematics, but maybe I have a weakness in music or something like that, and I can draw on the strengths in that area of another school. Also, it allows us to innovate better because we can bounce ideas off each other, create engagement with different realities, different worlds, because every school, in a sense, is a world of its own, with its own strengths, ideas, visions, and also it allows us to make emotional connections with others who may be facing the same challenges, the same difficulties. So I think there are many reasons why collaboration can be really powerful.
And what are the types of cooperation that you discover? Because I understand that you have a sort of map of different forms of cooperation. That's true?
There are, of course, very many ways in which schools can collaborate with each other, but not every way is as effective. So when we look at improvement in pupil learning, and that is what we have to be about in education, then it is certain types of collaboration that really work, and in particular where we have a collaboration that is relatively deep and that is focused on improving learning and teaching first and leadership in the school second. So it is forms of collaboration where, for example, we will engage in joint professional development between schools, where we will have teachers going from one school to the other and maybe engaging in coaching and mentoring, where we will have leaders in the schools working closely together and bringing in new leadership methods, new forms of distributed leadership, for example. So it can be work around curriculum, which can be very useful as well. Of course, there are other forms of collaboration which are also useful but less immediately for learning. For example, sharing resources can be a helpful thing, or collaborating on joint resources such as, for example, in vocational education, where you need a big expensive thing like an industrial kitchen. You can be very pragmatic and do that through a network.
And in general, when you have this kind of cooperation, what are the two types of a school that interact? It is a strong school and a weak school, or there are similars? It's a symmetric or asymmetric relationship?
We see both happening. We see symmetric relationships are easier. It is more easy to collaborate with a school that is similar. But in many ways, the asymmetric relationship, strong school working with one or more weaker school, is more powerful in terms of its school improvement impact. So we can see very good effects where a school that is particularly strong works together with other schools to improve those schools. And interestingly, we find not only that that has a powerful positive effect in many cases on those weaker schools, but we can actually also see improvement even in the stronger schools through that form of collaboration.
What kind of effect? Because this is an important point. For the strong school, it's clear that they are satisfied, they have a community which is very satisfied with their general activities and so on. And for the weak school, it's clear that they have this kind of cooperation and they enrich their work. But what is the advantage and the benefit for the strong school?
Okay, there are several advantages for the stronger school. The first is that we can, even if we are a strong school, learn things from the other school. Because when we look at educational effectiveness, school effectiveness, which is the field I come from, what we find is that it is not the case that in ineffective schools, in weak schools, we don't have any good practice going on. Rather, what we see is variation. So we see some pockets of good practice, but it is not spread around the school. It is within a culture in which there is also a lot of weak practice. But for a strong school, that means that if I can identify those pockets of good practice, I can learn from those, also from my school. Secondly, it is a very powerful piece of professional development for teachers and leaders in the supporting school to go out into another school and maybe mentor and coach people. It is a form of peer tutoring almost. And we know from all our research on peer tutoring that it is not just beneficial for the tutee, but not least for the tutor who through teaching others develops her own thinking and learning more deeply. So that's the second. Third benefit is a very pragmatic one, in which that we find that sometimes principals of a very successful school get a little bit bored with just leading that school. And this new challenge of improving another school is something that motivates and excites them.
They live it as a new challenge.
New challenge, exactly, yeah. So they find that interesting. And finally, we also mustn't forget the element of moral purpose, in that many people in education are very motivated to work for the good of not just the children in their own school, but all the children in their locality. And by helping other schools, they can have that wider impact.
And what is the extension of this phenomenon in Britain? We are talking about the 5% of the schools, or more than that? I don't know. And secondly, if they have some kind of incentives from the government to impulse this kind of cooperation?
Well, the first question is a slightly difficult one to answer because it depends exactly how you define cooperation and networking as to what percentage you would say are engaged in it. I would say probably if you are looking at the forms of deep collaboration that we are talking about, it's probably no more than 20 to 30% of schools. And the reason that it is that high is because there have been policy initiatives and incentives that have encouraged schools to network. There are certainly a number of positive incentives that have taken the form of financial support for all kinds of networking. There have also been legal interventions. For example, you can form something called a federation, and that has a legal status, which means that I can employ people as employees of the federation rather than just as part of one school, for example. And finally, within the English system, we sometimes also have a coercion of cooperation where the ministry or the municipality will say, you have to collaborate with another school to improve. So certainly there are incentives.
Well, I think that now we understand better. It's probably a policy in education in which include these impulse and incentives for the cooperation. What do you think that now and not in the past we have this concern about cooperation?
Yes, that's certainly true. I think we did see a change in policy in England before 1997. We had a succession of governments that were very keen on just promoting competition. And then in 1997 we had an election, we had a change of government, and then you will have heard of Tony Blair, I think. And then we had not a loss of the competition stayed, and it is still there, but a encouragement of collaboration alongside the competition. Of course, that is not to say that before that schools never collaborated. Schools have always, to an extent, individually taken initiatives that they wanted to work with others, but the policy drive came from this change of government that said, as well as the competition, we want collaboration also. And that has obviously led to a big increase in activity in this area.
And what are the obstacles? What is the reason that, for example, it's impossible or it's difficult to expand this policy more beyond the 20% of the school, which is the number now of the schools that cooperate in England?
There are several obstacles. I mean, one thing is that though there is this element of encouraging collaboration in policy, that is still within a framework in which the number one policy driver is competition and all kinds of what you could call neoliberal reforms of education. So you have a bit of a contradiction maybe in the policy that happens. Secondly, of course, collaboration, if you want to really make it work, is not so easy. Conditions have to be in place, so you need to work on making a network work. So things like, what are the goals of the collaboration? It doesn't work if you just go and say, okay, let's make a network, let's collaborate. It has to have a clear goal and clear agreements between the schools as to what you want to achieve. You have to trust each other, and that is not always so easy in a competitive environment. It takes time. You have to make a real commitment to it, support from the leadership, from the principals in particular. And if we are talking about activities like teachers from different schools working together, you need to make time for that to happen. So it is a big commitment and a non-trivial amount of work.
Interesting, very interesting. In Chile we have the municipality, which is the form in the land in which the schools, public schools are organized. And maybe the municipality can play a very important role in terms of the cooperation. This instance, this organization can organize the cooperation.
Absolutely, yes. I think the municipality can play an absolutely key role in fostering collaboration between schools in its area, because one of the issues in collaboration is creating a good match, creating partners that can actually work together well. And especially when we are talking about those forms of collaboration where you have strong schools working with weaker schools, of course, that is not always easy. There may be tensions. So the local authority, the municipality, is often the people who know each of their schools, who knows each of their principals, and can be the broker, the marriage maker who brings schools together. So that is one area I think municipalities can be very important in. Also in providing support to schools to develop the skills that you need to collaborate. So working with principals on what types of changes to leadership are required if you are collaborating as compared to when you are leading just your school or competing, those kind of activities. So I think the municipality can play a very key role in encouraging cooperation, and I would encourage municipalities to lead on that.
Good. Maybe other point which can be important for us is the cooperation not only among schools, but with other actors. For example, in our case, can be very important the cooperation between schools and university, or foundations, or technical assistance in general. What do you think about this topic?
I think it can be very valuable for schools to collaborate with different actors, be they foundations or universities, because again you are bringing in different perspective, different areas of expertise, maybe innovations that have not yet reached the school system so widely. So I think those collaborations are very valuable. What I would say there is that they can be even more difficult, and this is really a message to the universities. You have to engage in those collaborations as equals and not as we are the university who is now going to tell you schools what to do. And that is sometimes the problem that we do see.
Do you have some practical experience on that, Daniel?
Yes, I mean, I think you can think of examples of that, certainly within an English context where maybe the attitudes have been not so much to see everybody as equal partners, but to see the university or maybe another charitable body as the leading partner. And I think that is not the right way to approach it. And that way you will create resistance, and also what you will be missing is the learning that is two-way, because yes, schools can learn from working with universities, but universities have much to learn from working with schools and practitioners on the ground as well.
It was really interesting, this conversation with Daniel Muijs. In general, we think about the improvement in Chile as a sort of individualistic form. That is one school which improves, or at least one school with the collaboration of one institution which improves, and so on. But now we are talking about the possibility of networks of schools. That is a sort of cooperation in the improvement, which is absolutely interesting in terms of the educational policies. And well, Daniel, all the time at the end of this program of the Entrevista Educativa, we have one question for our guest. The question is, if you have to give one advice for us, for our educational system, what will be your advice?
Okay, you are probably now expecting me to say network and collaborate. But actually, if there was only one thing that you could do, then what I would really say is invest in teachers. Because all our research evidence says that the single most important influence on what happens to pupils is what the teacher does in the classroom. So the best way to improve the education system is to invest in teachers, in the recruitment of teachers, in the initial training of teachers, in the induction of teachers in that difficult period when they first go into the schools, and in the further professional development of teachers. That would be the one piece of advice I would say. But of course, it is better to do many different things
Good
as well.
advice. Thank you, Professor Muijs, for all this possibility to this dialogue, which is so interesting. Para nosotros finaliza un nuevo capítulo de la entrevista educativa. Quiero invitarlos, como siempre, a que puedan revisar el conjunto de entrevistas educativas que existen en www.educarchile.cl.